Hello, Facebook, YouTube, our Ontario Landlords Watch members. Tonight, I have special guests with me, Irene from the Toronto area, and we have Melissa from the Niagara region. We're going to be able to talk about everything that we talk about in the group, what we talk about on the phone, what we talk about on Zoom meetings. So tonight, we have a lot of different topics that we're going to cover, but this is just a landlord chat, something that you can hear. Hopefully, you don't hear my baby crying in the background because dad's watching, but this is what we got to do to keep advocating for landlords in Ontario. So tonight I'm going to get Irene to start us off, explaining us who she is, where she's from, how she got into real estate in itself, and then we're going to pick her brain for her pet peeves of what's happening in the landlord world. Irene, thanks so much. I was a spur of the moment. I'm like, yeah, Melissa and Irene are going to be great tonight. I'm like, let's do this.
Well, thank you for having me on here. My name is Irene. Our family business operates in Toronto and Barrie, and I'm a third generation property owner. We say property management, but we own and manage our properties. We got started way back in the 1950s. My grandparents bought houses in the beach area for $15,000. And today those houses are worth significantly more. We're very lucky to still own some of them, and we do renovate them as needed. We own houses and apartment buildings, and recently, in the last few years, we've gotten into commercial properties and condos.
Awesome.
We like to do things, we do as many jobs as we can ourselves as a family business. We're very proud of putting family first. And one of the things I love most about this job is the flexibility that it's allowed me. This is not what I went to school for, but this is certainly something that. So I went to school for special event management, and I ended up with a full-time job at a hotel running their maintenance and engineering department. And I was responsible for 977 guest rooms. And a few years after that, my dad approached me and said that he needed me at the family business. And this was a huge opportunity for me. And I took it. I jumped in with both feet. And I'm very proud that my dad and I have expanded our holdings and taken us from a very small family business to what I like to call a family enterprise. I'm learning along the way. Every day I learn something new. I've taken some classes, and I'm still always trying to better the product that we're offering, whether that's renovations, renovated units, whether that's a more educated office staff when we're communicating with rentals and handling applications and leases. We're always learning, and we take pride in that. We come from a very interesting history in Toronto. Over the years, our family in the past were known as slum landlords, and we were even the recipient of the Golden Cockroach Award in Parkdale. And I don't know if you've heard about Parkdale Legal Association, but every year they award the worst landlord in Toronto with the Golden Cockroach Award. And in the years when I was a teenager growing up, watching my parents and my grandparents do this, we were fortunately or unfortunately awarded this award. And it always stuck with me as that will never happen. Should I ever have the chance to help do this, we're going to clean this up. We are no longer that. We've gotten rid of that reputation. And we look for safe family homes. We renovate them to make them safe. And we want to provide the same type of environment that I would want my family living in. And in the last few years, I put my money where my mouth is. And my daughter went away to university, and she lived in one of our units, and she had roommates. And it was kind of it was nice to see that these people felt safe sending their children to the same, place where I was forcing my child to live. But what's good for us is good for other people, and vice versa. And integrity is one of the things that we put a lot of faith in and stand behind, and customer service. So those are kind of our pillars. The thing I love most about it is knowing that a family has a safe and healthy place to live. And when that's not the case, I take it very personal. When there is a problem in a unit, especially when something unexpected happens, that leaky basement that unfortunately we didn't know about, that now maybe there is a mold or mildew problem, or that roof that was leaking that we didn't realize right away. Being a small family business, it is about the money, but it is also about that experience for that tenant. And whether they're going to live in one of our units forever, or whether they're saving up to buy a house or live somewhere else, whatever their story is, we want to make sure that while they're with us, that they have a great experience. And so we're working towards that every day.
Awesome. Awesome. I already heard that story. I'm talking on the phone for like how many times? I don't even get to hear that story. I'm like glued to you. Okay, Melissa, give it a go.
Oh, now I don't know. Irene first, she killed it. What do I say now? So I'm located in Niagara region. I work for one of the big 5 banks. I have a long career in financial planning, investment consulting, and business operations now nationally at the bank. And I became a landlord several years ago, kind of complacently thinking, hey, I'm going to buy a rental property. This will be fun. And I didn't really know what I was doing. And but over the course of the past several years, I've had to learn and identify that owning and managing rental properties is a business, and it's also very much a people business. And so I really, much as Irene spoke about, quality homes for quality people, I think everyone does deserve to have a place to live. I do make sure that we take care of things as soon as they come up, and we do pride ourselves on that as well too. Example, I had at one of my rental properties, right at the height of when they shut everything down, municipalities weren't responding, nothing, everything was closed, and a sewer line collapsed on one of my properties. And I had to raise a lot of heck with the city, with plumbers. It was a fight just to get somebody out to do that. And I'm like, I have tenants. There were probably about 12 tenants across the 2 units, because these are larger family homes that were impacted by this. And so, I really, things like that happen, you really, as a landlord, you got to take them seriously, right? The big things, the small things. And I know that my tenants do see that we do take care of that. We are expanding into property management for others. And I think that we've built a reputation for maintaining properties well, taking care of our tenants, addressing issues when they come up, being fair, being firm, and ensuring that we're providing rentals on a non-discriminatory basis. So truly making sure that the client or the tenant is a good fit for the property. And so it's really been a great journey over the last little while. My father did invest in real estate as well, but I can't say it's something I particularly did learn from him. He had a different way of doing things, being of a different generation, the whole wink and handshake and here the place is yours type of deal. And in the environment that we live in right now, that's not prudent, and that's not necessarily great to do, because you really need to ensure that you're getting the right tenant, and you really need to ensure you're matching them with the right property so that they're happy as well. And so here we are. And the past year and a half, as I met yourself, Kayla, and really got connected into the broader community, it's been an amazing experience to really learn from others, to be able to teach others, to open your eyes to the big world of owning real estate and providing homes for people. It's a serious responsibility. So I'm happy to be here, and I'm very proud of how we manage things. Again, with integrity, that's really key here. And I hear a lot of horror stories about places that aren't managed well. That's terrible. It's terrible for those people, right? And so, so here we are.
And see, so we got some good landlords here. We got people who are trying to really provide exceptional customer service, making sure that they're providing maintenance when it's due. We have good landlords in Ontario that are absolutely being who are suffering by the decisions that our elected officials have done through the Residential Intensive Act, through the Landlord Intent Board, and of course the eviction ban that was in place for how many months? Now, come on, girls, like, you got to give me your 30-second clip on what you thought of this eviction ban when it came out.
Well, we were 1 day away from an eviction, a tenant who had not paid rent in 12 months. So pre-COVID, we were 1 day away from the sheriff coming in And unfortunately, that ban came down, and it's now been 5 months. These people have now lived in my unit for 17 months without paying rent.
Wow.
That's now most of that was pre-COVID, but that situation has not bettered. Just in general, the amount of money that stacks up, people who have made the decision not to pay their rent, and I issue an N4, we always look to do a payment plan first. We want to do what's right for them. I don't want to have to re-rent the unit. If they're in difficult times, let's work something out. Let's talk about a rent deferral plan. Let's talk about half rent for a couple of months. But at least they have the intention to continue paying, and at least they have the ability to get caught back up. Paying zero rent for that many months, there's going to be a lot of people in a rough situation when I can get these people back to tribunal.
Nice. Melissa, well, not really nice. You know what I mean.
I know what you mean.
Yeah.
And it is nice.
Go back to tribunal or well, it's not really nice going there either.
When they shut this board down, I think that they forgot that landlords are people too. So when you have a person who is renting out an accessory unit to be able to afford their housing because they're retired and on a pension, or you have somebody who is an immigrant to the country and has purchased a multi-unit so they can live in one unit and rent the others to build a place for themselves here. When you have, situations like this, that there's this misconception that all landlords out there are rich, and not all landlords are rich, and not all tenants are poor. And Kayla, we've talked about this many times. I mean, most landlords, I say, are pretty good at budgeting for emergencies, at budgeting a little bit for default by their tenants. They're not looking to come in and evict them the second they miss a penny of their rent. That's not what they're looking to do. There's conversation. Help me understand the situation. When they closed down the board and closed down much of the province and laid a bunch of people off, the first thing I did was reach out to my tenants and say, hey, we're in a unique situation here. I want you to know that if you have lost your job or there's a situation regarding your rent or anything you're concerned about, please reach out to me. Don't feel embarrassed. Let's figure this out together. In addition, if you have any maintenance concerns, for the time being, continue to let me know. If it's an emergency, I'm on it. If not, let's wait and see what goes on, and we'll schedule that repair at a later date. This is what many, and I would say probably a good chunk of the landlords were doing. And when they closed the board and prevented landlords from having any kind of recourse, what it did is it really opened them up to a lot of abuse, to financial abuse. And it wasn't right, it wasn't fair. And no, we don't want to see people on the streets, but these mass evictions that the tenant groups are crying out saying that this is going to happen, that's not going to happen. The board's going to do the exact same thing that the landlords were going to do, is they're going to try and work out some payment plans, and they're going to try to keep people in their home under a reasonable time frame. That's what they should have done. But completely shutting down the board, and at the time giving absolutely no date, 6 months before they opened it, unacceptable. That's not fair. That wasn't
still
fair.
receiving tenant complaints during that time. Not landlord, but tenants were still being received.
They declared us an essential business and then handcuffed us and said, by the way, you are responsible to house this person at all costs, even your own. You need a unit to move into because you've lost your job. You need to sell your home. Too bad. Can't do it. How is that fair? That wasn't fair.
And that's where this was handled in the wrong way. It was really broadcast very quickly. Don't pay your rent if it's about food or paying your rent. Make sure you're putting food on the table. Well, if food's a human right and housing is a human right and water is a human right, we're still having to pay our utilities. We still have a grocery bill that we still need to pay. But instead, they allowed people to live 6 months for free and gave them into that concept like, okay, I can do it, because now they think that this whole COVID rent is now going to be forgiven, and they're trying to get cities to implement some type of bylaw to forgive this type of behavior that was on it. And this is where, even though when the eviction ban came in place, and ideally it would have been nice for the Doug Ford to come out and be able to say, listen, this is, the evictions are not quite are going to go as fast, but we're going to be able to put some funds into these regions and where tenants have access to funds if they fall in a rent arrears or they need last month's rent deposit to relocate through these times. But he didn't say that. And the worst thing is that when you talk to these type of agencies who were here before COVID, I would say, hey, any tenants who are having any type of difficulties with paying their rent, are you guys going to help them with rent arrears? And they said, as of right now, we stopped issuing funds for rent arrears, but we're still issuing funds for last month's rent deposit. So even the government programs that are there to help tenants not fall into a delinquency, stop landlords from giving the tenant, the N4 notice and not having us go through this payment plan. And that's what the new thing is going to be, is the payment arrangement. This is the payment agreement that's going to come with the landlord and tenant board. And they're working on trying to get those type of the wording on this precisely, because this is what's probably going to decide if the adjudicator is going to evict or put them on a payment plan. It's got to be this, let's work this payment plan. But they have a lot of work that needs to get done on this payment agreement to really make it fair to both. And we're going to be talking about what the landlord and tenant board's up to tomorrow night at 8 o'clock. But we do see that this eviction ban has obviously had a wave. And this is why Irene is going to be on CBC News tomorrow. And I just spoke with them yesterday. So we should see something on the news to bring some media attention to what is happening in the small landlord world. Now, you can be big or you can be a family, but we're still a business. And just like they put rent relief out for other businesses, they didn't consider landlords to be a business. I guess they just think of us as just as investors, maybe.
Even the commercial program that was in place for commercial tenants, the CECRA, favored the tenant. So first of all, the landlord had to do all the work to apply for it. And the landlord had to agree to forgive 25%. Not every landlord out there is able to forgive 25% per month. Again, the big bad business that we're all painted to be, maybe, but not the small family business. Not even, like I said, we're a family enterprise. I can't just ignore 25% of every commercial unit for 3 months. What started out as 3 months and is now expanded. That program was announced at the end of March, beginning of April. And that application portal did not actually materialize until June 2nd. So for all of April, May, and the first couple days of June, everybody was talking about this plan coming down, and it wasn't actually in place. I applied June 2nd for one of my commercial tenants, and I did not have a response from them until July 2nd. So there's another full month that I was waiting. And again, I was doing that at a 25% hit to my bottom line.
Wow.
Now, I don't make a lot of money on that property. I don't make much money at all, but I have a lot of respect for the current tenants. And, I have a future plan in mind for that building somewhere down the road. I'm not trying to gouge anybody. I'm just looking for decisions from the government at all levels that make sense. And I'm having a hard time finding that right now.
Melissa, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, well, there are two pieces there. So one, the messaging was really tough. When you have good tenants who normally pay their rent a week or two in advance, the first calling and saying, hey, do I have to pay my rent this month? Because I don't think I do. You know that the messaging is wrong. And the other side of it is that when they come back and come down on landlords, and it's like they're smacking your hand saying that you must work with people and you must apply for these programs. And why aren't you? Maybe stop and think about why they're not applying for the programs. Perhaps the program was developed without proper input from stakeholders, such as landlords who actually are required to make those applications, right? And these are the conversations I'm seeing. I don't have any commercial properties myself, but I'm certainly active in kind of seeing those conversations. And that seemed to be the general consensus. And across the residential piece, we were just left holding the bag, period. Couldn't evict, don't bother issuing a notice. I was having issues with one tenant. Their words exactly. The board is closed. What are you going to do? You know what? You're right, the board is closed, but eventually it will open. And at that point, we're going to have to deal with these issues. So why don't we talk about it now and come to an amicable resolution rather than digging your feet in and not, because at some point you're going to have to pay the piper, right, on this issue, which, you know, it's just, it's so frustrating. And I completely appreciate from a tenant side, I get that they're scared. In some ways, they're worrying that, okay, if I've lost my job, I couldn't pay my rent, maybe my landlord's not reasonable and maybe they're scared because they can't afford to pay their bills without receiving the rent. You know, there's a lot of fear going around, and I think that more could have been done to alleviate that fear and put a little bit more fairness to the programs and the messaging in place, period, because we're already getting the short end of the stick. We know that the backlog was months long before COVID. What does it look like now? Right? And how does that harm the greater good of tenants? It's hard for a landlord or property manager to accept a tenant that they think might be good, but maybe doesn't hit all the notes on paper, let's say credit history or things like that. And they know it could take 6 months to 12 months to evict them if they stop paying. You know what? Pass. I'm going to go on to the next person. It makes it so much harder for somebody to do that, right? It hurts the tenants too.
They came out with the CERB benefit, right? They got $2,000 a month. Sometimes actually it was more money for people who weren't even making that much. And then for Irene, you'd be able to collaborate on this. So when you guys had that relief for your property taxes with Toronto, did they just not take anyone's money for the 4 months?
So what they did is they extended the final tax dates, and for water bills they were giving you a slightly longer payment period. There's been absolutely no relief on the amount of money that is owed. You know, I budget for it and I plan for it. So in this particular case, my property taxes were paid in full on the dates that they needed to be paid. But you know, at the same time, I had budgeted for that under the expectation that I could expect X amount of dollars coming in over the next few months. That's been a, you know, it's a financial spreadsheet that I have. Like it's always worked. In this case, while the money was there for me to pay those bills, the money's not coming in as quickly as I had expected. So now for the next few months, I'm going to need to be even more careful with those bills. You know, I have a very large insurance bill that's about to happen, a renewal on a property, and multi-residential property owners are already taking a major hit, sometimes in to the tune of 50, 60, 70% increases for their premiums for multi-residential. So I've got that renewal coming up and I know it's going to be higher than usual, and I'm kind of dreading it. I haven't been in this situation before. We've always been very well prepared. And I'm feeling that without any kind of actual relief from government, from, you know, the city or whatever might be whatever might be possible, I'm equally worried for myself, but I'm more concerned about those small landlords who maybe have only 1, 2, 3, 4 properties, who don't have that savings account sitting there, like where this is their retirement, or this is their property where they're renting out a second suite and that person's not paying. Those people are going to find themselves in significant hardship if something else doesn't happen for them. And now the potential that they might freeze a rent increase next year that I read today, that's very scary.
That is the people are looking for the rent increase. You know, it obviously should have been out by now. And they also have the concept of, can landlords, especially small landlords, be able to weather another second wave of COVID? Will they enforce another lockdown on, you know, the board and put in an eviction ban in again? And that's what the crazy part, like I've been running our group now for over a decade, and you get to see people saying like, I'm going to sell, you know, but now you can see more posts. I'm selling. Here's my property. Like I'm done. Like I'm not going to be a social agency for the government anymore. And this is what the government has done. And we just recently spoke at a Cambridge Council meeting here regarding pod homes. So it's literally little boxes inside of a park. So we got to speak on it, just to say, one, Obviously, you're using this as a Band-Aid solution. This is not going to be long-term. This is going to cause more headaches than it is to solve them. And all you need to do is understand the real housing issues, and that they're at the provincial level. They're even at municipal level of how they're so heavily involved. And I'm going to get Tony Miller on here very, very shortly, because there's some movement happening in Ottawa where they literally now become the RTA and the LTB for the city of Ottawa. It's like, oh, wow, we got more people to listen to. This is great. And of course, we got to open the floodgates, because all these landlords are going to be, or homeowners are going to be like, yay, let's be a landlord. No, that is not how it's going to go. And because of the restrictions and the handcuffs that they keep putting on these businesses, they wonder why rents are increasing. They wonder why there's a low supply. And they wonder why they're thinking of taking over hotels and motels as shelters. So they got themselves completely bagged. And what's the problem is that they have elected officials who have no clue about this industry, who don't know the RTA, who don't know the Landlord and Tenant Board, and don't have a hands-on experience dealing with tenants who are abusing the system, or even dealing with landlords who abuse the system, or even dealing for good landlords at that. So we have to kind of take our conception that these politicians know these issues. Why aren't they doing what is needed to correct the real issues at the RTA and the LTB, and to get some a grip on the municipal government and what they do, unless they're worried that it's going to be political suicide, trying to show that they're in favor of the landlord when they feel that most of these tenants are going to be their vote. Now, Irene, we talked about this before we went on live. What was your thought on John Tory?
John Tory is one of the people who stood up and said tenants shouldn't need to worry about being evicted. John Tory stood up after that and said, Bill 184, I'm going to fight that. He has a lot of people that voted for him that are tenants. And, you know, he got up there and said, we don't have enough money. If people aren't paying their property taxes, the city of Toronto is in financial peril. I believe he used the word peril. The people who are truly in peril are the people who have 1 and 2 units and who have unpaying tenants. I always want to, you know, there was a very controversial mayor prior to John Tory in Toronto, Rob Ford. And while people love or hated him, I've got to tell you, I had a lot of respect for him. He was one of the only politicians that was asking where that money was going. And he used the phrase, the gravy train. And when I drive through downtown Toronto and I see a condo building going up and I see all the balconies, I look at it as simple math. Every single one of those balconies represents at least $4,000 or $5,000 a year in property taxes to the city of Toronto. That doesn't include the land transfer tax that's paid to the province and an equal amount to the city of Toronto. I couldn't even do the math on that. So when you factor in all that money for every one of those balconies that's going into the city, every penny of property tax that I paid this year, and they're still sitting there scratching their head going, oh gosh, we don't have enough money. I would love to go in and find out at the bottom line where all this money is being wasted and why it's not being put to proper services. Every time I hear that there's another service cut, that they can't run their programs for kids or for seniors or for, you know, mental health programs or anything else out there, where did that money go? Because I got to tell you, I paid my bill. I know a lot of other people that paid their bills. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I understand the big picture, but it really comes down to that small picture. And if you're spending more money than you're making, there's a problem. And you got to go right back down to the books and pull out those receipts and figure out where he is spending the money and what can be done about it.
Oh, love it.
I would love to have him come out and spend a day with me. I would love to have John Tory come out and spend a day with me and actually, you know, enjoy being a business owner in his city. You know, I think he and I would both have a great time.
We got to call up Irene. We're going to go on a journey. We're going to record the journey out in the field with Irene.
Get yourself a GoPro.
I would have to do it.
Day in the life.
I got to tell you, one of our properties, we have a very unique garbage situation. The municipal standards for our area will not allow us to build an enclosure where our garbage area is. The garbage, the solid waste management says, oh my God, you guys need an enclosure. I said, I'll build one tomorrow if you can get property standards to allow me to put one here. Oh, I said, I'll do whatever you want, but the left hand needs to talk to the right hand here.
Mm-hmm.
So then another city department called and said that I needed to move my garbage to another part of my parking lot. I said, unfortunately, I can't. That's over top of a parking garage. And due to the structural integrity of my parking garage, I can't have garbage trucks driving over it. So the problem was dropped. 6 months later, property standards knocked on my door again and said, well, you're getting all these garbage complaints. I said, okay, are you going to let me build a fence? No. Okay. So finally, I wrote a letter to the city and I said, guys, property standards, solid waste, my city councilor, and the mayor. I need you guys, the 4 departments, to sit down and have a meeting about my property. I'll send you the property survey. I'll send you photos. But you guys need to figure out what I'm allowed to do. And you know, within 24 hours,
do that.
Within 24 hours, I had Rob Ford and his team of people standing in my parking lot.
Nice.
John Tory doesn't come out when I call him. We've had a number of issues at a few properties where, once again, we get stuck somewhere between bylaw, municipal enforcement, solid waste. Somewhere those departments don't communicate with each other, and I have to include an email to my city councilor, and then I don't get anywhere. And then I include an email to the mayor, and all of a sudden, then somebody returns my call. It should not be that hard for me to be able to be a good landlord. I should not have to work that hard to get answers from my elected officials.
Melissa, what's going on in your neck of the woods, your politicians down there?
Well,
are they involved? Are they picky? Are they just waiting for landlord licensing to come in place?
They tried to bring the landlord licensing into St. Catharines. Shoot, I believe it was maybe 2 years ago now. Has it been 2 years? Time flies. And of course, that was received with quite a bit of uproar. I believe that a big part that contributed to that was the student housing areas. But they can't target that because that's discrimination. So they wanted to apply licensing to everybody. And we basically come back, and our local landlord community pushed back and said, this is going to do nothing but drive up the cost that we have to pass on to the very tenants that you're trying to provide affordable housing to. Because you're going to slap a licensing fee on me for $330, and then you're going to pay somebody to come around and inspect these properties when we already have those kinds of people within the city hall to do these things. So you're going to drive up all these costs, and the end user, which is the tenant, is going to be the one ultimately who's got to pay for it, and it's going to be prohibitive. So they did end up bringing some licensing into Thorold, which is right next to St. Catharines, largely due to help regulate student housing there. And I don't actually own any student housing myself, so I don't really want to speak to how that's impacted because it hasn't impacted me. But I was very glad that we were successful in pushing back on that. And I think that we need to collectively rally against and do so. Their mechanisms are already in place to govern and to oversee and to deal with maintenance issues, and they're reinventing the wheel, and they're just costing more money at the expense of what? At the expense of affordable housing. You want affordable housing? Stop the nonsense, clean up the process at the LTB, and let's get those applications in for properties that are falling into disrepair, and let's get those applications in and deal with these tenant issues. Absolutely. But we know that the backlog comes from non-payment. Why is that? Why is that? And so we can certainly address all these other issues, and we can address them in Ottawa, and we can address them in Cambridge, and we can address them in St. Catharines, and we can address them in Toronto, but they seem to keep pushing and putting more and more restrictions on us. And we need to connect with our politicians, and we need to bring them a bit of a dose of, hey, this is what it's like. Right? You can't keep doing this. I remember there was one tenant too I had that she was on ODSP, and there was a holdup because she couldn't get a hold of her worker. to help cover the last month's rent. It'd been some years since she moved, and father had lost her job and said, "Oh shoot, like, I've got last month's rent. I can give that to you. Is it okay if I move in with 2/3 of first month's rent and I can make up the rest of it on the 20th?" And my response was, absolutely, you can. But the shortfall came from a failure within our system, right? And I wrote to my MPP on that, and I raised a bit of heck over it and said, you have vulnerable people who cannot access the resources they want to, and it's impacting their housing. I'm an understanding person, and I can wait that 3 weeks for the rest of the money without a problem, not a concern. But some can't, and this is contributing to the problem too.
And unfortunately, some have, and they can't take that chance again because unfortunately it didn't turn out as well.
Right. Exactly.
We all have great tenants. There are a lot of great tenants out there. But unfortunately, we all have had our horror stories, and we can really only take so much risk the next time.
And this is where we look at that duplicates of services that you guys mentioned about property standards. You've got the landlord and tenant board, and Irene, you're dealing with something completely in its own beast in itself in Toronto. With it's called what? Safe TO.
It's called Rent Safe TO. It's for properties that are more than 3 stories or have more than 10 units. It costs $11.02 per unit per year. And for that, you get, so let me back up and say, prior to Rent Safe coming in 2017, municipal property standards would come out to your building when they receive complaints. No heat, maintenance, the usual property standards issues. If they found that there was a significant need, they did a full audit where they came with 4 inspectors and would spend the entire day, not just looking at everything that needed to be done, but also knocking on doors and speaking to tenants. It would set up a trailer. Golly. Sorry?
I said, oh, good golly. They're looking
for So I have some horror stories from that, but they would also set up a trailer in your parking lot, and they would put out notices letting anybody know, come and tell us how bad your landlord is. And then we would receive city orders based on that. With the Rent Safe TO program, what they did is this came in, whether or not you want to believe it or not, it was brought in because of all the complaints regarding Toronto community housing. And they claim that
they should have been having a beer right now instead of
so
or whiskey or something.
They bring in Rent Safe TO in 2017, and they set their mandate that they will visit every multi-residential property in the city of Toronto. And they went through and they did a once through, and they graded you on it's a scale out of 100. Your entrance, your lobby, your stairwells, laundry room, elevators, graffiti, outdoor grounds, outdoor walkway. Now, I don't know if you can see this, and it's reversed. But it basically just says different items, and there's a grade. It doesn't tell you what you need to do to get a 5 out of 5. It doesn't tell you where your problem was. So it doesn't really give landlords, once again, that tool to be able to be a better landlord. What it does is it gives you a final grade, and based on that final grade, they determine if they will visit you in 3 years, 2 years, or whether they're coming back for a full audit. And now when they come for that full audit, there is a cost associated with that above and beyond the licensing fee. I don't have a problem being licensed. I have a problem with all the additional work that it has created.
Yeah.
I now have to put a notice board at the front of my building that is to their specifications. That includes things like how often we have a cleaning schedule, who our pest management company is. No problem. I have those in place. They want us to keep a log of, this is a direct quote from the book, unscheduled cleaning.
Oh my
So when Mrs.
God.
Smith spills her double in the lobby, my staff member on his way to clean it up is also supposed to stop and jot it in our cleaning maintenance log. Clean double off floor.
I'm sorry to be laughing, but I never got the full details of the program until you get to see it in action. Now,
Yeah,
is this program in government housing though in Toronto? Is this in Toronto housing as well? Do they have to follow the exact same thing? And do you think they're actually following it? And do they have the funds to actually follow this type of requirements?
Now, one of the requirements is that while there is an active pest issue in a building, I cannot rent a unit. So I've got a particular building, and you know what? Every once in a while, I get a call about cockroaches. We act on it immediately. We preventatively treat the surrounding units. I do my due diligence. However, while I'm dealing with that, I can't be actively renting a unit. No problem. A very good friend of mine comes to me about a month ago, and she says, I've lived in the same place for 17 years. I've got to move. What should I know about renting in Toronto? And I said, well, you need to check this Rent Safe TO messaging system that they have at the front of every building. So she reported back to me and said she didn't see them in some of the properties that she went to. So once again, the good landlord is doing their absolute best, and I'm putting my heart and soul into following all these rules. And there's all these landlords out there who are getting away with not doing it. And I can assure you, if I didn't have to spend that time and that money, I could be putting it towards other things.
And again, the process is already in place for the tenant to be able to file an application for $53 because it went up in price a little bit, but it's $200 for the landlord. And this is how they try to reinvent the wheel, another duplicate of services. They want to give you a perfect score, but they know that they won't have any workers coming out to you within within 3 years. They probably want it sooner so that they keep the need for this program to be available and going. And this is probably another part of that wasted funding that we've talked about with our politicians of where the money is going, where is this wasted, where are the duplicates of services in order to do it. Now, Melissa, I had a question for you when it comes down to, obviously we see the struggles that we go with the RTA and LTB. Now you see what's happening in Toronto. Don't think that this is not going to happen in a city near you. So always pay attention to what's happening in the other regions around you. And because of this is why we are getting into affordable housing, trying to get ourselves into solutions. Now, because we just had that meeting with my city regarding these pod homes, what's your thought process on tiny homes in tiny homes or pod homes, or there are shipping containers? Like, obviously this is what they believe is going to be the affordable housing solution until they actually get to speak with a bunch of landlords.
Well, I would say we don't build out, we build up. So efficient units make a lot of sense. We know that there's a lack of supply, and there's also a significant amount of red tape when it comes to either building accessory units or development of larger units. And I would hate for a catchphrase of a tiny home to catch on so much that they think that that's really going to be the solution to the issue we're facing here. We do need to create more units, but I'm not convinced that that particular one is the way to do so. I guess it sounds cute from a novelty standpoint. Oh, look at this cute little house with this cute little yard.
Toronto, we also have laneway houses.
You could have laneway houses, okay. When you've run out of real estate and you need to fit it in somewhere, that's a little bit of a in Toronto, that's different. And in Niagara region, I can't say we're really facing that, but we still have the same issues in that there's not enough supply to meet the demand. And when I book showings for my available units, and I book 2-hour windows, one in the afternoon, I'll book one in the evening to accommodate different schedules. I get so many inquiries, I have to turn so many away, you get so many applications. The reality is I can only rent to one person, and many of them are often, they seem great, but I can only rent to one, right? They're very much a demand issue, a supply issue. And so, if you can take some vacant land and you can build, even if the units, so when you think about from a profitability standpoint, right? If you say, well, it would be nice to have a 750 square foot apartment, but if I could build, instead of an apartment that size, if I could build one smaller, I get more units in there, I can then in turn house more people. It could be a bit more cost effective. And then we start to address the issue of what's getting people on the streets. They can't find the housing, right? They just simply can't find it. And when you're couch surfing and you're trying to live with family, is a tiny house the solution? No. Could you have an accessory unit on your property for, let's say, an adult child or an elderly family member that perhaps your own home won't accommodate that? That may be something that some people choose. But when you look at the size of the properties that we're dealing with, where is the room to even do that? How are you getting tied into the services to do it, right? I would rather there be more incentive for development of larger buildings so that we can create more units that are actually useful to the people that need them. It's a shame to see the homeless problem that we have, and we need to build up our community supports, and we need to keep connected with these people, and we need to keep them housed, and you can't keep them housed if you don't have enough units. Okay, someone who's on a path of recovery who misses a rent payment and after 8 months, 12 months, eventually ends up homeless. I mean, it's really hard to get back up on that ladder, right? So we're not serving our greater community by saying, oh, let's build some tiny houses. We need to really focus on overall development planning and what we can do to really add value into our communities by building housing, not just, a pod in a park.
They look at where these little tiny houses, pod homes, either shipping containers, if they failed anywhere else. And then they got to look at the trickle effect of putting all of this together in one combined area. And one, I don't even know how this is going to be good for someone's mental health, being in something so small by themselves. Is going to be wheelchair accessible. This is the people that, I guess there's high demand for people who need that one bedroom. And I think that's where they're getting these little tiny homes just to get that section of people needing homes kind of covered. But what's going to happen with what is that rental rate for that tiny home? And would that cause a normal sized one bedroom or bachelor to increase in price? Because this is what you get for a tiny home, and this is what you're going to get for a real life size type. It's like, here's your baby size and here's your life size apartment. Like, this is where you're going to see a difference. And again, probably another increase in itself. But again, we have to get ourselves into a concept of stop using these band-aid solutions, start working in long-term housing goals. And you got to do that with, why is the government competing with other businesses? Like, I don't think taxpayers really want to be continuing to keep building, managing, maintaining, supplying, and subsidizing the government housing. There's no incentive to move out of it. You can own $500,000 worth of assets and still qualify for government housing. So the system there is also broken. The OW and ODSP system is broken, and we got a fly in my face. And we have the landlord and tenant board also broken, along with the policies makers of our municipal level. Now, we already got ourselves into 47 minutes. I try to keep this at 30, but I'm just loving the conversation that is happening here today. And I want to bring you girls back on to do another segment, because we never even got to all the questions that I even had. But let's get a tip. Give us a tip to all the landlords watching, and what would be that strong about helping them manage their place, if it's about giving them a tip on how to continue to keep advocating. You go, Melissa, putting you on the spot.
I prefer that Irene goes first.
Thanks, Melissa. First and foremost, trust your gut, whether it's with a tenant applying for a unit or whether it's with a repair. If you have two options to repair in front of you, and one is that Band-Aid solution, and one is spending a little bit more time and a little bit more money and not having to do it again for 5, 10, 20, 30, 40 years, trust your gut and protect your investment. Ultimately, at the end of the day, you need to do what's right to protect your investment, whether that's your retirement, your extra vacation money at the end of the year, or whether that's your children's future. Trust your gut and protect your investment.
Nicely said. Melissa.
Okay, now it's my turn. So I follow a rule of thumb when it comes to pretty much anything real estate related and pretty much anything else too. It's trust but verify. So this definitely is a people business. You have a responsibility as a landlord and an obligation to maintain your property in good repair and to care for the well-being of how your tenants are living in the housing that you are providing. And that's something to take seriously, to understand what those obligations are and to understand the rules and to be respectful of those. And when it comes to tenants, I document everything. If I have a conversation with somebody and they say, I have an issue with this other tenant that lives in this building, I make a record of that and I say, okay, well, what are you looking for an outcome from this here? Oh, I'd like you to talk to them and get them to stop. Or, sometimes it turns out that they're blowing something way out of proportion and you say, okay, let's talk to the other person. I'm not going to assume anything. And, but, it seems that there's a bit of an issue around this, and you really have to put some time into managing tenants that way, verifying what they're telling you. When it comes into a situation, I'm going through this right now with one of my tenants where there's an issue that I've had to complete an N5 form. And in researching how that works, you have not only the facts, but also the evidence. And so going through and putting that together helped me to understand whether or not this was truly a legitimate issue that I should be following this route. But that was not my first stop. My first stop was conversation. My second stop was an unofficial written letter. And my third was the N5, which is going to be pursued from there. So not only do you have a responsibility to take care of those things, you have a responsibility to educate yourself. And that's really going to serve you well, because you don't want to step in it with somebody. When you've got a tenant who's got the landlord tenant board on speed dial, you better be careful what you're doing and understand where you can push back and where you're being bullied as a landlord because they're waving the stick of the landlord tenant board in front of you. You could say, listen, I understand the rules as well as you do, possibly even better. And I'm going to verify what's going on here. But this is how we're going to do it. We're going to work together. It doesn't need to be combative, right? But by all means, if you're not gaining cooperation, you're acting fairly. Act. You need to do something. Don't just let it go. That's how you find yourself in a situation spiraling out of control. So, overall, a tenant tells me something, I verify what they're telling me. I catch someone in a lie. That's a completely different situation, and how that's handled versus somebody who I'm able to verify their truth. And I always ensure that you're educated and informed. And if you're not sure, we certainly have a community that you can reach out to. But if you're really not sure, seek the proper legal advice. There's no, yes, it costs money, but what's it going to cost you not receiving that advice if you don't know? Ignorance is not an excuse.
Now, quick 30 seconds. You get an elected official in front of you. Maybe it's Doug Ford or the Minister of Housing himself, or even the Attorney General himself. What would you want them to change that's going to allow you to continue to be an investor in Ontario, or encourage you to keep building and supplying rental units in Ontario? Go, Melissa.
They need to clamp down on the inefficiencies and how the enforcement of the RTA is done via the LTB. Okay, they need to address those inefficiencies, because that will take care of a significant part of the problem, and it will clear a way to stop having the conflict with the municipalities feeling they need to step in and enforce, because the LTB can do their job and actually take care of the problems that are coming up.
Great. Irene?
I need to have some control over my own property. I spent a lot of money to buy it. I spend a lot of money to maintain it. And I need to know that at the end of the day, it is still under my control. I need to be able to, at the end of a lease, at the end of 12 months, I need to be able, 3 months before the end of the lease, I need to be able to sit down with that difficult tenant and say, listen, you're not happy, I'm not happy. It's
almost like employment.
Here's your 3 months notice, but at the end of this lease, it's time for you to find somewhere else to live. And as a corporation, I don't have that opportunity to serve that for personal use form. My only option is an N11 agreement. So what I would be looking for from the government is a chance to, have some control over my own property, and as Melissa said, let's make decisions, let's make processes that actually make sense. One of the things that infuriates me the most, and I had a really great opportunity, Parm Gill sat down with a bunch of us in Cambridge back in the fall, and I made a comment about the N5. And Melissa, you just mentioned the N5. When you get ready to serve that second N5, you have to know whether it's a second N5 or it's another N5. And that terminology can make or break you. And that process doesn't make sense. And I would love a chance to sit down with my elected officials and explain the difference and explain how that can really hurt a small business owner.
Yeah, I think this is where we're going to be talking into a lot of the solutions that we were able to propose to the Landlord and Tenant Board through their stakeholder meeting that we were a part of. We had them for a full hour. So tomorrow night, we're going to be able to touch on that meeting, what we hope to come about it. And it's definitely getting more involvement from stakeholders on a regular basis to the Landlord and Tenant Board, because the people who are doing it now, they have no clue. They don't know what it's like. They don't know the loopholes that we have inside of our system. We know that there's abuse from tenants. We know there's abuse from landlords. We have to create that system so that it is good for good landlords, good tenants, and of course the taxpayers, because if a taxpayer realized what's happening in their broken system of paying for government housing, they probably wouldn't be liking it either. Melissa,
I think we all want to address the same issues. A tenant should not be able to hold your property hostage the way that they currently can, and a landlord should not be neglectful in their duties. And those that are going to abuse the system, the rules in place should be meant to prevent that from happening, not enabling it.
And
that's it. That's all we're asking.
It's not asking for much. It's just fairness and a balance.
Benefiting tenants. I want happy tenants too. If I got a tenant who's got a problem with another one that I need to bring in front of the board, I don't want to tell them, sorry, it's going to be a year before I can do something about this. That's not fair to them. It's not, right? And that's the state of what we're dealing with. So,
guys, I can't thank you enough. Like, you ladies are fantastic. You're firecrackers. You've been a part of Ontario Landlords Watch for many years and supported the crazy things that I've been doing and working on paperwork with me to give the solutions in paper now to the elected officials, because I could be a mouthpiece to what they hear out of my mouth. That's like, okay, we should write it down just in case. So we're looking forward to Irene seeing you on CBC tomorrow.
Yes.
I think it's going to be right more. It could be right before the first, because obviously they like doing stories before the first. And I can't thank you enough, and I can't wait to have you guys on again. So hopefully everyone's tuning in now tomorrow night at 8 o'clock. It's definitely something that we're really passionate about. I really am excited to be able to share the game changer for us. We are struggling, and it's not that we're struggling, it's a slow process to really lobby the government, to protest, contacting your MPP. It's all little things that can help, but once you've been doing it for almost a decade and you only now see some changes of Bill 184, you see the Landlord and Tenant Board opening up these stakeholders meetings, like, this is significant amount of change that I've seen in 10 years. And this is why we should be really proud of the group that we've created and the members, because we wouldn't be able to do it without our members commenting and sharing articles of what's happening in the landlord world. So girls, I want to thank you. For anyone who's watching, if you want to come on and give us your story, give us your opinion, this is what it's all about. We can't be shy. We have to be vocal. We are the housing supply of Ontario, the small mom and pop operations, and we need to do this, not as just landlords, but as taxpayers of Ontario. I want to thank everyone who is watching and giving us a like and a thumbs up and sharing this video. We're only there to look out for the creating a better system that works for everyone. I want to thank you again. Tune in tomorrow night at 8 o'clock. Until we meet again, happy renting.